Tom, let me ask you this question. What would you say to those who believe Israel has overplayed its response, that the Israeli military could perhaps now be accused of genocide against Palestinians, that they've become just like the Palestinians and could themselves be accused of war crimes? What would you say to people who fall back on the genocide claim?
On that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians? It's a bogus claim. And let's just talk numbers. Let's take the emotion out of it, okay? On May 14th, 1948, at midnight of the 13th, midnight on the 14th, the state of Israel was handed over to them, or the land was handed over to what is now the state of Israel by the British Protectorate, by the British Crown, okay? If we go back to 1948 and look at the numbers, at the time, from the river to the sea, all right, the people who would now claim to be Palestinian today, there were approximately 1 million of them. 1 million, okay? As soon as midnight came on the 14th, Israel was attacked on all sides by the Arab armies of every state around it. Okay. When the war ended for the formation war, the foundation war ended, approximately 700,000 so-called Palestinians had left the area, leaving about 300,000. This is 1948. Do you know how many Palestinians are in Israel proper and in the West Bank and in Gaza today?
I don't know.
Approximately 7 million. So you tell me, what kind of a genocide has a population growing from 300,000 to 7 million in an 80-year period? Does that sound reasonable to you? The state of Israel itself has approximately 10 million people. 78.5% of that is Jewish. Okay, they're Jews. 21.5 are Arab Muslims. All right, there's no apartheid there. Arab Israelis occupy every single position that they're capable of occupying within the Israeli government. In the professions, there are judges that are Arabs. There are people in their Knesset that are Arabs. They have approximately almost 3 million people, 2.5 million people that are Muslims living in Israel proper. There are 2 million living in Gaza. Okay, there are approximately 3 million living in the West Bank. Now, let me ask you a question. We heard from Hamas themselves, from their Ministry of Health, or their agency of health. I don't know what the hell you would call it, but we heard from them. That was the source. I think this was a couple months ago, that the total number of killed in Gaza was approximately 50,000 people. Now, they didn't distinguish between civilians and Hamas soldiers. They later came out and said 30,000 Hamas fighters were killed. That left 20,000 civilians that were killed. Okay? Now, if you go to the UN and you ask them, what is the state of their infrastructure today? They would tell you that approximately 72% of their buildings are completely flattened. All right. Now let's think about this clearly. There are 2 million people in Gaza. It's the most densely populated place. It's like the size of Camden County. Okay, and it's got 2 million people in it. If 72% of the infrastructure is destroyed, wouldn't you expect to be, to have a number that is a little bit more than 20,000 civilians? Wouldn't you expect 72% of that 2 million to have been injured or killed? And the reason that they're not is because Israel, the IDF, warns people where they're coming. They phone them, millions of phone calls. They text them by SMS messages. They indicate to them the safe corridors for them to leave the area where they're coming in to do demolition work. Okay, that's why the numbers are not as high as they normally are. You know, if we go back to the Second World War, over 80% of the 52 million casualties of the Second World War were civilian. They were civilian casualties. We have a ratio in Gaza that is about 1-to-1, one civilian death for every one Hamas fighter. Okay? You show me another war that was fought with that much restraint. And I'm not even talking about the 160 million tons of food that the Israelis escorted into Gaza to feed the Gazans that was taken from them by Hamas. I'm not talking about the million vaccines that they gave to Hamas children. Okay? Nobody mentions this stuff. Nobody mentions the fact that the water that Gaza has is coming from Israel. They didn't cut it off. I mean, they are acting with the most, how can I say this, with the most moral restraint as possible to avoid civilian casualties. Whereas the Hamas fighters, it is their intention to kill civilians in Israel. That is their intent. So when they sit there and they say, oh, well, they're becoming like Hamas and all that, that's a load of crap, because it's the intent that says everything. The immorality of war always begins with the aggressor. The person defending themselves is not immoral. They would be immoral if they didn't defend their people. All right? So, you know, okay, you asked me. Apartheid. There's no apartheid in Israel. I'll tell you where apartheid is over there. Gaza. There's not one single Jew living in Gaza. You know, you look at these numbers and you say, where are they coming up with this propagandized bullcrap? So, in any case, that's my answer.